the vast emptiness of space hides secrets far more terrifying than we can imagine. From ancient moons to stars that devour, each story reveals a darker side of the cosmos. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts. What mysteries of space haunt you? Or do you know of chilling cosmic tales? Join us as we journey into the horrifying unknown. Let's begin. It started with a low rhythmic hum, faint, almost soothing. I first heard it when our deep space probe returned after 10 years drifting through the void. We'd been monitoring its progress for months, eagerly awaiting the data it had collected from the uncharted sector near Epsilon Eridani. But this sound? This wasn't part of the expected transmission. At first, we thought it was interference. The signal wasn't constant, cutting out at random intervals. But then we realized it was deliberate, a pattern we couldn't decipher. I leaned into the speakers in the lab, letting the sound fill my ears. It felt like the hum was crawling under my skin, whispering secrets to my brain I couldn't understand. Weeks passed as we tried to decode the transmission. Software failed, linguists failed, even our most advanced AI couldn't break it. Yet, something about it felt alive. My colleagues grew restless. Dr. Alvarez, the lead astrophysicist, claimed she could hear faint voices in the hum, chanting, calling her name. I laughed it off at first. Space makes you paranoid. But then, the hum began to echo in my dreams. I saw black, featureless shapes moving in the periphery of an endless void. They didn't have faces, but they were watching me. I woke up drenched in sweat every night, my heart pounding like I'd been running for hours. It was getting harder to concentrate on my work, harder to focus on anything but the sound. We received the first visual data from the probe 3 days later. It was static at first, just specks of light blinking across the screen. But then, the image shifted. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, it zoomed in on something. A structure, enormous and unnatural, floating amidst the stars. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a planet. It was an intricate lattice of twisting spires and glowing orbs, like a living cathedral made of black glass. I heard Alvarez scream. I turned to find her clawing at her ears, blood running down her arms. She collapsed before anyone could reach her. She didn't wake up again. But then, we realized the hum was louder now, even without the speakers. It filled the room, the bass, our minds. I could feel it vibrating in my teeth, my bones. The patterns we couldn't decipher now burned like symbols in my vision when I closed my eyes. They weren't just trying to communicate. They were trying to invade. The last thing I remembered before losing consciousness was the image on the screen. The lattice structure had moved. It was no longer in the stars. It was here. I woke up, alone. The lab was empty, and the signal had stopped. The silence was deafening. The probe's data feed was gone, but the image of that black cathedral is burned into my mind. I don't know where my team went, or what came through when the structure arrived. But I hear the hum again now, not from the speakers. It's inside me. They warned us Mars held secrets better left buried, but no one believed them. I was part of the first wave of terraformers, tasked with making the red planet habitable. The chamber wasn't in our plans. It was day 142 when we stumbled on it. Our excavation bots were drilling for water reserves when they struck something unearthly. Not rock or ice, but smooth black metal, untouched by time. The bot's sensors went haywire, detecting an impossible energy signature. Against protocol, I went in to investigate. The chamber was enormous, an obsidian cube buried a mile beneath Mars's crust. Its walls pulsed faintly, as if alive, glowing with shifting patterns of light. It was cold, impossibly so, even through my thermal suit. At the center stood a pedestal, cradling a perfectly round object. Not quite a sphere, it seemed to shimmer and ripple, as if it were made of liquid trapped in a frozen state. I should have reported it immediately, but then it spoke. Not in words, but in feelings. It filled my mind with whispers of knowledge and power, visions of a thriving Mars, terraformed in an instant, lush with forests and oceans. It promised me the key to save humanity. All I had to do was touch it. But then the whispers shifted. They turned sharp, urgent, warning me not to trust the others. The team would try to destroy it, they said. Only I understood its true potential. I stumbled out of the chamber, shaken but said nothing. I couldn't risk them finding out. That night, I dreamed of Mars, but not the one I knew. This Mars was alive, breathing, and angry. Crimson tendrils of light reached across the sky as the planet writhed beneath them, screaming. The next morning, the whispers began again, louder this time, urging me back to the chamber. I found myself drawn to it, unable to resist. Inside, the object pulsed brighter, matching the frantic rhythm of my heart. I reached out, just as Dr. Keller shouted my name. She must have followed me. I tried to explain, but she didn't listen. Her eyes widened in terror as she looked at the object, then at me. "We have to seal this place," she whispered. "It's not a tool. It's a prison." But then the chamber shook. The object flared, and I felt it. Rage, ancient and boundless. I wasn't controlling it. It was controlling me. Keller ran, shouting for the team. I should have gone after her. Instead, I stayed. I touched the object. I imagined the words flowing out by me like a torrent of power. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Mars's surface splitting open, red light pouring into the sky. I woke up on the surface, surrounded by silence. The chamber was gone, along with Keller and the rest of my team. Now I'm alone, and Mars is alive. Its whispers are everywhere, promising salvation or annihilation. I don't know how much time I have left, but I can feel it spreading. I thought I was saving humanity, but I've unleashed something else entirely. The anomaly appeared out of nowhere, a star unlike any we'd ever seen. It wasn't on any star charts, and the astrophysics community buzzed with theories. A rogue celestial body, a supernova remnant, whatever it was, it sat impossibly still in the void. No orbit, no movement, just pulsing with an unnatural black light. I was part of the exploratory crew sent to investigate. Our vessel, Vanguard, was equipped for deep space anomalies, but none of us were prepared for what we found. The star didn't burn. It absorbed. Its edges shimmered like a mirage, its core darker than the blackest void. As we approached, it became clear this wasn't a star at all. The instruments went haywire the closer we got, readings fluctuating wildly. What terrified us most wasn't the gravitational field. It was the voices. It started with whispers, faint and indistinct, as though coming from the static of our communication system. But then we realized the voices weren't external. They were in our heads. I heard my sister's voice first, even though she'd been dead for years. "Come closer," she said, her tone soft, coaxing. "I'm here." Waiting. Around me the crew acted strangely. Captain Torres locked himself in his quarters, claiming he saw his mother on the surface of the star. Engineer Patel began dismantling systems for reasons he wouldn't explain. But then the dreams began. I saw Earth, but not as it should be. Cities crumbled beneath skies filled with screaming shadows. The star loomed above it all, consuming everything in its path. I woke up gasping for air, the whispers louder now, promising answers if I only stepped closer to the observation deck. We made the mistake of sending a probe into the star's core. It vanished the moment it crossed the event horizon, but not before transmitting one last image. It wasn't heat or plasma inside. It was faces, billions of them, screaming silently, locked in eternal torment. The crew turned on each other after that. The whispers weren't just voices anymore, they were commands. They wanted us to enter the star, to feed it. One by one, my crewmates walked into the airlock, their faces serene, and jettisoned themselves into the void. Now I'm alone. The whispers are deafening, the promises sweeter. I can feel the pull of the star, not physical but emotional, a compulsion I can't resist. My hands hover over the controls, trembling. I know what it wants. The last thing I'll see is its surface rushing toward me, and then I'll join the faces in the dark. When Earth's second moon appeared, the world stopped. It wasn't like we'd discovered a rogue celestial body drifting into our orbit. It had always been there, or so the scientists said. Hidden behind Earth's shadow, its presence perfectly cloaked for centuries. But then something shifted, and now it gleamed in the night sky, pale and unsettling. I was part of the research team sent to investigate, stationed aboard the orbital vessel Horizon. Our job was to map its surface and determine its origin. At first, the mission felt routine. The moon, gray and pockmarked like its older sibling, gave no immediate indication of anything unusual. But then we found the structures. They were massive spires, twisting like smoke frozen in time. No entrances, no markings, just smooth obsidian reaching into the void. Their arrangement wasn't random. They formed a perfect spiral, miles across. The deeper we scanned, the stranger it got. Beneath the surface, buried in its crust, were thousands of heat signatures. Not just heat, movement. That night, the dreams began. I saw the moon's surface stretching endlessly, its spires glowing faintly, as figures, too tall, too thin, walked between them. They didn't have faces, but they knew me. They whispered, not in words but in emotions, fear, hunger, rage. When I woke, I wasn't alone. Dr. Lawson, my bunkmate, was standing at the viewport staring at the moon. "They're awake," she muttered, her voice trembling. "We shouldn't have come." But then the ship's alarms blared. Our scanners picked up massive energy bursts from the spires. The heat signatures beneath the surface were rising, converging toward the largest spire. From the bridge, we watched in horror as the moon began to change. The craters shifted, reshaping into massive staring eyes. The spires tilted, aiming toward Earth. The whispers turned into screams. Crew members started collapsing, clutching their heads, their noses bleeding. Lawson tore at her own face, shrieking, "Ah, they want us to remember," before she threw herself into the airlock. The final transmission from Earth came moments later. "The tides are shifting," the voice said. "The oceans, they're rising." We never made it back. As I write this, the moon is glowing brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. I know it's not just a moon. It never was. It's been waiting for something, and now it's here. Whatever it wants, it's not going to stop with us. It wasn't just a comet, it was singing. When Comet 1128 streaked into Earth's atmosphere, astronomers celebrated its return, claiming it hadn't been this close to our planet for over 10,000 years. But they never mentioned the sound, the low, haunting melody that radiated from its icy tail. The song was faint at first, detectable only through specialized instruments. But then it grew louder. I was a sound technician at the Deep Space Research Facility, tasked with analyzing the comet's strange emissions. The frequencies were mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. When played back at a higher amplitude, the song was beautiful, mournful, like a hymn sung by a forgotten god. It stirred something deep within me, a mix of sadness and longing I couldn't shake. But then the people started disappearing. It began with Dr. Reed, our lead astrophysicist. He was recording the song late one night when I found his lab empty, his chair spinning slowly, headphones discarded on the floor. Security footage showed him walking outside, barefoot, his face serene. He vanished into the desert surrounding the facility. No trace, no tracks. A week later, the disappearances spread beyond our base. Entire towns were reporting people walking away into the night, humming the comet's melody under their breath. Those who stayed behind were terrified, claiming the song invaded their dreams, promising salvation if they just followed. I tried to stay away from the recordings, but the song lingered everywhere. In the wind, in the hum of the facility's power grid. One night I couldn't resist. I locked myself in the soundproof lab and played the comet's melody at full volume. It wasn't just sound, it was alive. I saw visions of towering spires made of ice and light, stretching endlessly into a dark void. Shapes moved between them, slender and otherworldly, humming the same tune. I felt them looking at me, welcoming me. But then I saw Earth. The comet's tail brushed the atmosphere, and everything changed. The oceans churned, the skies blackened, and cities crumbled. The song wasn't a gift, it was a lure. And we were already caught. I shut the recording off and stumbled out of the lab, but it was too late. My colleagues were gone, their stations abandoned. The last message on our comms was a single word whispered by countless voices: "Come!" Now I hear it everywhere, louder with each passing hour. I can feel it pulling at me, and I know I won't last much longer. The comet isn't just passing by, it's calling us home. We thought it was just another pocket of dust and gas, a harmless nebula cataloged as GN17. But GN17 wasn't like the others. From the moment our ship, Eclipse Voyager, entered its fringes, something felt wrong. The space around us was darker than it should have been, shadows stretching unnaturally across the stars. It began subtly. Our ship's sensors reported objects moving just beyond our visual range, yet nothing appeared on the monitors. Our communications were filled with static, interrupted by faint whispers in languages none of us recognized. I remember the first incident vividly. Ensign Malik swore he saw someone standing on the observation deck, a woman in an old Earth spacesuit. Her helmet was cracked, her face pale and hollow, but she vanished when he approached. Malik was rational, a skeptic, but after that, he wouldn't go near the deck again. But then, the whispers became voices. They called to us, each crew member hearing something personal and impossible. I heard my father, dead for 20 years, calling me by a nickname no one else knew. Captain Herrera claimed to hear her child, though she never had one. We tried to leave, but the engines wouldn't engage. It was as if the nebula was holding us in place, drawing us deeper into its heart. The lights on the ship flickered constantly, and each time they went out, we'd see figures in the shadows, dozens of them, their forms transparent and flickering like static. Malik was the first to crack. He walked into the airlock without a suit, muttering, "They're waiting for me." We tried to stop him, but he was gone before we could override the controls. The last image on the external camera showed him floating toward the nebula, where the shadows seemed to reach out, pulling him into the dark. The rest of the crew followed, one by one. Some claimed they were going home. Others simply stopped speaking and walked into the black. No, it's just me. The voices have stopped calling me by name. They're just screaming now, an endless wail of despair. I see them outside the ship, hundreds of them, all the lost souls of GN-17 trapped and searching for company. I know I'm next. This nebula isn't a cluster of gas. It's a graveyard, and soon I'll be part of it. We thought the Horizon was just another deep space exploration vessel, sent to chart the farthest reaches of the galaxy. But it wasn't just space we were exploring, it was time. The mission began like any other. Our task was to investigate a strange cosmic anomaly, a rippling, swirling patch of blackness on the edges of the galaxy. The readings were like nothing we'd ever encountered. Energy signatures that fluctuated in impossible ways, bending light and space itself. At first we thought it was a black hole or a wormhole. But then we crossed the threshold. Our instruments went dark, the ship shuddered, and the stars outside stopped moving. We were still, but something else was moving inside the ship. It started with whispers, barely audible, the sound of doors opening and closing when no one was there. I found Captain Devlin in the control room, staring at the screen, unblinking. "We've passed the edge," she whispered. "Time doesn't exist here." At first we laughed it off, just another technical glitch, another strange side effect of the anomaly. But then the crew began to age. And then not age at all. Engineer Ross, the youngest among us, grew older with each passing day, his face lined with wrinkles as if a decade had passed in mere hours. But Lieutenant Ellis, who had been stationed on the lower deck, remained untouched by time. His hair didn't grow, his skin didn't change. He told us he could feel the horizon pulling at him, calling him to the edge of the ship. It was Lieutenant Ellis who found the door. It was an old maintenance hatch, sealed for years, buried deep within the vessel. But the door wasn't just an access point. It was a gateway. When we opened it, we didn't find the bowels of the ship. We found another ship, a darker, older version of the Horizon. Its corridors were covered in dust, and its crew were us. The duplicates of the crew moved as if they were sleepwalking, their faces blank, trapped in loops of time they couldn't escape. I saw myself in one of the hallways, standing in front of a control panel, pressing buttons I'd never seen before. And then it hit me. Everything we were doing, everything we'd done had already happened. We were trapped in an endless cycle, reliving our mission over and over again, slipping between moments like ghosts. I'm writing this as the air supply begins to dwindle. The whispers are louder now, coming from every direction. Ellis has been standing at the ship's edge for hours, staring into the endless void, waiting for the horizon to pull him in. He thinks that if he jumps, he'll escape. I know he's wrong. The horizon is no longer a ship. It's a prison, and we're all its prisoners, caught in a loop that will never end. The ship we saw was just one version of us, forever doomed to repeat this mission. And I'm afraid I won't be the last to vanish into it.